The silence was the first thing that broke the spell. It wasn't the grinding of gears or the snap of a drive chain. It was the sudden, eerie quiet of a $290,000 machine deciding it no longer worked for you. On a Wednesday morning in May 2022, at exactly 7:44 a.m., Mark Birch was sitting in the pressurized, leather-seated cabin of his John Deere Exact-Emerge planter. The air conditioning hummed. The GPS guidance system was locked onto a satellite 12,000 miles above the Illinois soil. Everything was perfect until the screen in front of him turned red. The notification was simple, clinical, and devastating. Subscription expired. Planting functions disabled. Contact your dealer. Mark didn't move. He blinked, expecting the glitch to clear. He had paid the $4,000 annual Precision Ag subscription 3 weeks ago. He had the digital receipt on his phone, but the machine didn't care about receipts. It cared about a digital handshake that wasn't happening. Somewhere between a server in a climate-controlled data center and this dusty field in Champaign County, a packet of data had been lost. And because of that lost bit of code, the most advanced planting technology on the planet had just turned itself into a very expensive piece of lawn furniture. Mark reached out and tapped the retry button. The screen circled for 30 seconds. Connection failed. He tried again. Same result. He was standing in the middle of a 400-acre field, with a 10-day window to get his corn in the ground before the spring rains turned the earth into a swamp. Today was Wednesday. His dealer didn't open until Monday morning. The weight of the situation began to press down on his chest. In modern farming, time isn't just money, it's survival. Missing the optimal planting window by just 4 days could slash his yield by 15%. That was the difference between paying the bank and losing the farm. Mark climbed out of the cab, his boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. He looked at the massive 24-row planter. It was a masterpiece of carbon fiber and high-speed electric motors. It could plant seeds at 10 miles per hour with sub-inch accuracy. But right now it was useless. It was a prisoner of its own software. He pulled out his phone, searching for a signal. 1 bar. He dialed the dealership's emergency line. "Jim, it's Mark Birch. My planter just bricked itself. Subscription error." "I know, Mark." The voice on the other end sounded exhausted. "You're the 5th call this morning. Corporate is doing a scheduled maintenance on the operations center servers. They migrated the database, and it's not pushing the authentication tokens to the machines in the field." "Then push it manually," Mark snapped. "I've got seed in the hoppers and a storm front coming Sunday." "I can't, Mark. The system is locked on their end. They said the maintenance could take until Monday morning to fully sync. There's no override. The software is designed to disable the meters if it can't verify the subscription. It's a security feature to prevent pirated software." "Security?" Mark's voice rose. "I'm the owner. I'm standing right here." "You own the steel, Mark," Jim said quietly. "You only license the code, and right now, the license is pending. My hands are tied. I'll call you the second the server pings." Mark hung up. He looked at the horizon. The sky was a cruel, perfect blue. He felt a sudden, sharp realization. He had spent $250,000 on a machine that required permission from a stranger in a suit to do its job. He wasn't a farmer anymore. He was a tenant of a tech company. He threw his hat into the dirt and kicked the massive tire of the tractor. The machine didn't even vibrate. It sat there, indifferent, waiting for a signal that wasn't coming. Before we see how this crisis forced a legacy back into the light, listen closely. If you've ever felt like the things you bought are starting to own you, if you're tired of subscriptions for things that used to just work, hit that subscribe button. We tell the stories of people who reclaimed their independence. Now let's go back to the Birch farm, where the old ways were about to meet the new reality. Mark drove his pickup back to the main yard, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Maybe he could rent a neighbor's planter. No, everyone was in the field. Maybe he could hack the software. Impossible. He pulled into the gravel drive and saw his father, Thaddeus, sitting on a wooden bench outside the workshop. Thaddeus was 77 years old. His hands were thick, scarred, and perpetually stained with the grease of 1,000 engines. He was sharpening a pocket knife, the rhythmic shick-shick of steel on stone the only sound in the yard. "You're back early," Thaddeus said, not looking up. "The planter is dead, Dad. Software lock. Dealer says we have to wait until Monday." Thaddeus stopped sharpening. He wiped the blade on his thigh and looked at his son. His eyes were the color of flint. Monday? The rain is coming Sunday night. The soil will be cold by Tuesday. I know that, Mark shouted, his frustration finally boiling over. But what do you want me to do? I can't hotwire a computer. Everything is sensors and fiber optics. If the server says no, the machine says no. Thaddeus stood up slowly. His joints creaked, but his posture was straight. He didn't say anything. He just started walking toward the long, low shed at the back of the property, the one with the sliding doors that hadn't been opened in years. Mark followed him, confused. Dad, what are you doing? We don't have another planter. We don't have another computer, Thaddeus corrected. He reached the shed and grabbed the heavy iron handle. With a grunt of effort, he slid the door back. The air that rushed out was cool and smelled of old burlap and gear oil. In the shadows sat a shape covered by a heavy gray canvas tarp. Thaddeus grabbed the edge of the tarp and pulled. Dust billowed into the air, caught in the morning sunbeams. There it stood, a John Deere 494 corn planter, 4 rows, cast iron frame, mechanical plate drop system, no wires, no sensors, no GPS. It had been built in 1958, the year Thaddeus graduated high school. It was a relic from an era when a farmer's success was measured by his sweat, not his data plan. It's a 4-row, Mark, Thaddeus said, slapping the metal hopper. It doesn't care about a handshake. It doesn't know what a server is. It only knows how to drop a seed when the wheel turns. Go get the 40-20 tractor. I'll get the grease gun. Mark looked at the 494. It looked like a toy compared to the Exact-Emerge. The paint was dull, the chains were stiff with old dried lubricant, and the rubber tires were cracked. He did the math in his head. It was a brutal calculation. The 24-row planter could cover 30 acres an hour. This 4-row relic, maybe 4 acres on a good hour. He had 340 acres left to plant. That was 85 hours of straight driving. Dad, the math doesn't work, Mark said, his voice flat. Even if we run 24 hours a day, we won't finish before the Sunday storm. It's impossible. Thaddeus didn't stop. He was already unscrewing the cap on a grease fitting. The math of a computer is based on everything going right. The math of a farmer is based on what you can actually get done while the world is going wrong. You can sit here and calculate your failure, or you can get the 40-20. Every seed in the dirt now is a seed that won't rot in the mud on Monday. Mark stood there for a moment. He looked at his smartphone. No new notifications. No server-restored message. Just a black screen reflecting his own tired face. He turned and walked toward the tractor shed. He climbed into the 1970 John Deere 40-20. It didn't have a computer. It had a key, a throttle, and a heartbeat of pure diesel. He fired it up. The exhaust stack puffed a cloud of black smoke that smelled like work. They spent the next 4 hours in a fever of mechanical resurrection. They soaked the drive chains in kerosene. They scrubbed the rust off the seed plates. Thaddeus pulled out an old wooden crate filled with different plates, round holes for large seeds, flat holes for small ones. He held a handful of corn kernels against a plate, checking the fit. No sensors were telling him the seed size. He was using his eyes. He was using 50 years of memory. The soil is heavy in the low spots, Thaddeus said, his hands moving with rhythmic precision. We set the depth manually, 2 inches. If it hits the clay, we jump off and crank the screws. Don't trust the markers. Trust the line of the trees. By 2 p.m. Wednesday, the 1958 planter was hitched to the 40-20. It looked like a ghost from a different century. They filled the metal hoppers with seed. Mark felt the weight of the bags, real weight. No vacuum tubes sucking seeds from a central tank. Just gravity and a spinning plate. Mark pulled out of the yard. The 40-20 groaned as it took the weight. As he reached the edge of the North 40, he looked back. The $290,000 Exact-Emerge was still sitting exactly where he had left it, a monument to a future that had stalled. He lowered the 494 into the dirt. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound of the seed meters echoed across the quiet field. It was slow. It was loud. It was working. The first 10 acres felt like a joke. Mark was used to watching a screen that mapped every square inch in neon green. Now he was looking over his shoulder at a marker arm dragging a line in the dust. He had to steer. He had to listen. He had to feel the vibration of the planter through the seat of the tractor. If a chain snapped, there was no alarm. Only the change in the hum of the machine would tell him. By sunset on Wednesday, he had finished 20 acres. His back ached. His eyes were stung by the dust. In the modern tractor, he would have been listening to a podcast in a climate-controlled bubble. Out here, he was breathing the field. He smelled the upturned earth. He felt the cooling air of the Illinois evening. Thaddeus met him at the end of the row with a thermos of black coffee and a sandwich wrapped in foil. The old man didn't ask how it was going. He just looked at the rows. They were straight. Not GPS straight, but farmer straight. "Keep the RPM steady," Thaddeus said. "The meters drop based on the speed of the wheels. If you surge, you gap. If you drag, you double. Be the clock, Mark." Wednesday night bled into Thursday morning. Mark didn't go home. He slept for 2 hours in the cab of the 4020 while Thaddeus took a turn. The old man drove with a terrifying, steady focus. He didn't need the headlights. He knew where the fence line was by the shape of the shadows. On Friday morning, the wind shifted. It started coming from the south, warm and humid. The Sunday storm was gathering strength. Mark checked his phone again during a seed refill. A message from the dealer. "Server migration encountering complications. ETA for system restore moved to Monday, 12 p.m. We appreciate your patience." Mark didn't get angry this time. He just tossed the phone onto the floor of the tractor. "Patience," he muttered. He looked at the 494. The old iron was covered in a fine layer of gray dust. It had been running for 40 hours straight. No reboots, no updates, no handshakes. "We're at 140 acres, Dad," Mark said, his voice raspy. "Then we're 140 acres ahead of the rest of the county," Thaddeus replied. He was checking the tension on the main drive chain. "Look over there." He pointed toward the neighbor's farm, the Miller place. A brand-new Case IH planter was sitting idle at the edge of the road. Miller was leaning against his truck, staring at his phone, waiting for the world to turn back on. He was a prisoner of the grid. Mark realized then that the 494 wasn't just a machine. It was a declaration of independence. Every click-clack of the meter was a middle finger to a corporation that thought they could own a man's time. He climbed back onto the seat. He didn't feel tired anymore. He felt a strange, cold clarity. He was a farmer, not a subscriber. Saturday night arrived with the sky the color of a bruised plum. The wind was no longer a breeze. It was a warning. It whipped across the flat Illinois plains, carrying the scent of ozone and wet pavement from 3 counties away. Mark was at the 280-acre mark. His eyes were shot through with broken veins. His hands had cramped into the shape of the steering wheel. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw rows of dirt. Every time he opened them, he saw the flickering orange glow of the 4020's analog gauges. The 1958 planter was screaming. Not literally, but the metal-on-metal rhythm had changed. The bushings were dry. The chains were stretched. It was a machine built for a 40-acre farm, and it had just been asked to conquer an empire. "She's getting hot, Dad," Mark shouted as he pulled into the headland for a final seed refill. Thaddeus didn't say a word. He walked to the back of the planter with a gallon of heavy-duty gear oil. He poured it directly over the drive chains, letting the thick, amber liquid coat the moving parts while they were still hot. He checked the seed hoppers. Empty. He hoisted a 50-pound bag of corn, the 68th bag of the weekend, and dumped it in. "The sky is falling, Mark," Thaddeus said, looking west. "Finish the north section. Leave the fence rows. Just get the heart of it in the ground." "I can finish it all," Mark said. His voice was a rasp. "Don't be a hero. Be a farmer. Get the crop in." Mark pushed back out. The first raindrops hit 10 minutes later. They weren't soft. They were heavy, cold, and vertical. The dust turned to mud instantly. The 4020's tires began to spin, the lugs clawing for traction in the darkening fields. Mark shifted down. He locked the differential. The old tractor let out a guttural roar, white smoke pouring from the stack as it fought the earth. He couldn't see the markers anymore. He was driving by instinct, following the ghost of the previous row. The 494 planter was dragging through the mud, but the plates kept spinning. Click-clack, click-clack. It was a primitive, stubborn sound. It was the sound of a machine that didn't know how to quit because it didn't have a brain to tell it that it was tired. At 11:30 p.m. Sunday, the sky opened up. A deluge. Mark made one final pass, the tractor sliding sideways in the muck. He raised the planter, turned for the gate, and headed for the barn. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Monday morning at 8:04 a.m., the sun was hidden behind a thick, gray blanket of post-storm clouds. The yard was a lake of mud. A white SUV with the Grandview logo pulled into the driveway. Jim, the dealer, stepped out. He was wearing a clean polo shirt and holding a ruggedized tablet. Behind him was a younger man in a suit, a regional manager from the corporate office. "Great news, Mark," Jim shouted, stepping carefully over a puddle. "The servers are back up. Sync is 100%. I've got the authorization token right here on my tablet. We can have that ExactEmerge running in 10 minutes. You'll be able to make up for lost time with the high-speed motors." Mark walked out of the shop. He was covered in grease from his forehead to his boots. He hadn't showered in 4 days. He was holding a cup of coffee that looked like used motor oil. "Don't bother, Jim," Mark said.
"What do you mean?"
"The weather is clearing by tomorrow afternoon. You can get started then." "I'm done," Mark said. The regional manager stepped forward, frowning at his tablet. "That's impossible, Mr. Birch. Our telematics show your ExactEmerge hasn't moved since Wednesday morning. Our satellite data shows 0 acres planted for this GPS coordinate." Mark pointed a greasy finger toward the north field. "Your satellites are looking for a signal. My corn is looking for the sun. I planted 340 acres while your cloud was in a coma." Jim looked at the old 4020 tractor parked in the shed. He saw the 1958 planter, dripping with mud, its chains still coated in Thaddeus's amber oil. He saw the empty seed bags piled high in the corner. "You used that?" the regional manager asked. His voice was filled with a mix of confusion and genuine disgust. "That machine isn't calibrated. It doesn't have individual row shutoff. Your seed spacing will be erratic. Your yield data will be non-existent. You've compromised the integrity of your harvest for the sake of—" "What? Stubbornness?" Thaddeus stepped out from the shadows of the barn. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked up to the regional manager, took the expensive tablet out of the man's hand, and looked at the screen. It was showing a success message with a green check mark. Thaddeus handed it back. "You have a green check mark on your screen," the old man said. "I have 340 acres of seed in the ground before a 3-inch rain. You tell me which one fills a grain bin in October." "This is a violation of the user agreement," the manager stammered. "Using unauthorized equipment for precision-grade seed can void your warranty on the ExactEmerge." "Then take it back," Mark said. The yard went silent. Only the sound of water dripping from the barn roof remained. "What?" Jim asked. "Take the machine back, Jim," Mark repeated. "I'm canceling the lease. I'm not paying for a tool that asks for a permission slip from a stranger every time I want to work. I bought a planter, not a subscription to a farm I already own." "Mark, be reasonable," Jim pleaded. "It was a one-time server issue." "It wasn't the server, Jim. It was the principle. If I can't fix it, I don't own it. And if I don't own it, I'm just a sharecropper with a nicer cabin." The men in the white SUV left 10 minutes later. They didn't leave a voucher. They didn't leave an apology. They just left a trail of mud. By October, the unauthorized corn was 6 feet tall. When the combines rolled through, the yield monitor didn't show a disaster. It showed 210 bushels per acre. A bumper crop. The seed spacing wasn't sub-inch perfect, but the timing was. The corn had caught the early heat. It had missed the late-season drought. It had survived because it was in the dirt when it needed to be. Mark Birch never went back to the high-tech planters. He bought a larger, mechanical 12-row unit from a retirement auction, an old 7000 series. He refurbished it himself. No sensors, no cloud, no handshakes. Every year after the last acre is planted, Mark and Thaddeus take the 1958 John Deere 494 back to the shed. They clean it. They oil it. They cover it with the gray canvas tarp. It sits there in the dark, a silent sentinel. It doesn't need to be updated. It doesn't need to be verified. It just waits for the day the world forgets that the earth doesn't care about software. It waits for the day the clouds in the sky matter more than the clouds in the servers. And on that day the old iron will be ready.